Thanks for joining us for another episode of Retail War Games. Today we sit down with Jamie Parker, CEO of Summit.
It was kind of fascinating reading up on you before we sat down with your incredible history at Nike and then being the CEO of Jaybird and now with Summit. And anyway, it's been fun to kind of get to know you briefly. So tell me a little bit about your history at Nike.
Yeah, so I joined Nike in 2004, so it feels like a long time ago.
Yeah.
Been at this for a little while. I have sort of a non-traditional background. I came out of finance into the consumer product space, and sort of wasn't thinking about retail or consumer or fashion or design in any real way as a career path, but I had always been deeply connected to sports.
Yeah.
And in finance, I worked in retail and consumer and really loved the brands that I got to work with. And I realized that finance is really not the passion. It's really about consumer and thinking about marketplaces and how brands and retailers interact. And so it was one of those unexpected opportunities that you kind of just know in life you got to jump on.
Yeah.
And I'd never been to the West Coast. I'd never, I was New York
born.
So
New York born.
I was New York born and raised, spent a lot of time in New England, went to school in the Southeast.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Washington and Lee.
Oh, Washington
undergrad.
Lee, that's right.
Yeah.
And did soccer there.
And played soccer there.
Yeah.
And had this, connection to sport. And so Nike had always been a brand that I had an emotional connection to as a consumer. Yeah. And when the opportunity came up, I was just like, this is the pivot you kind of have to jump on.
It is. It's amazing in retail with consumer brands and trends how interesting the field is every day. See, if you're in the industry, every day you wake up, it's interesting. Like when I used to do banking really early on in my career, and I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done.
We've got a shared background.
Yeah, I mean, it's good for the people that are like really smart and analytical. For me, I mean, I've got a little part of that to my personality, but I wanted to see product. I mean, I was in sports as well. So I used to work
tactile experiences are so sort of magical.
They really are.
And so I jumped on the Nike opportunity, and you're right. This industry is extremely dynamic. I'm sure we'll talk about some of the things kind of going on, et cetera. But what I loved about Nike, you'll find like I'm always learning. I'm always a student. I'm never an expert, right? I'm always kind of learning new things and sort of believe deeply in that growth
mindset. It's a great
mindset.
Philosophy, yeah.
But Nike is like this perfect background for that, because there's nothing in any document that says this, but it is highly rotational. So like every 2-3 years, you're changing.
Yeah.
And so you get this amazing experience of learning new things, and the brand is really comfortable kind of allowing people to jump from, hey, you're a designer and you jump into marketing.
That is insane.
You're a finance guy and you jump into product, which was my background.
I've heard a lot of good things about Nike. There's actually a few big players in Utah that also went the Nike route. So like Nate Randall, CEO of Gab.
Yep.
There's one of the guys from one of the heads of Kickstart. Also was out of Nike.
Yep.
So and the common thing that I've noticed about all three of you are very smart people. I mean, I'm serious. It seems like they hire really top-notch people that are really intellectually sound. And
I would put
sound.
myself more in the category of just lucky and sort of
all right.
learning,
one of those guys.
Learning on the go.
Okay, you're the one hire that was learn on the go guy.
Yeah. But what's so cool, I've jumped around to all these different experiences and jobs, a lot of them sort of this intersection of brand and retail.
Yeah.
And how fun. In my case, oftentimes in different countries and sort of different places, so getting experience outside of the U.S. market and learning new markets as well, it's rare. And so for us, my wife, who's a co-founder of Summit, and myself, we were there for just under 15 years. We just had this kind of magical ride of getting incredible experiences and learning as we went.
So what did you do at Manchester, and then what did you do later on in Brazil?
Yeah, so I came from finance, got into strategy, moved into product, and then sort of got on this GM path and moved over to Manchester United and ran Nike's Manchester United business out of Old Trafford. So I'm literally, we shared, I was a soccer kid.
Yeah.
And now I'm like working at one of the most iconic clubs on the planet.
Oh yeah.
In my late 20s and early 30s.
It was pretty perfect.
Yeah, it was ideal for a lot of reasons.
So you were stationed in the stadium?
We had a building just next to the stadium.
You had a stadium right next to it.
But based in Old Trafford. And so Nike, it was sort of a unique relationship. We ran Manchester United retail. We did a lot of the merchandising, even the Nike, non-Nike stuff. And we created product. And it was just this really cool experience of you're sitting, 50 feet from a mega store that has 80,000, 90,000 people coming to it on a single day.
Oh my gosh.
And so like trial by fire in terms of learning retail, right? You're in this situation that probably 100 doors on the planet go through, where you have this unique sort of traffic situation where particularly on a game day, you've got incredible traffic. And so, one of the coolest things was the ability to trial new stuff.
Yeah.
You get information really quickly, right? Because if you can test it against 30, 40, 50,000 people in a single day, you're getting pretty incredible, feedback.
Wow.
And so like, one of the things that stood out to me about that experience when we were thinking about this dynamic of really high traffic, high volume retail, what are the opportunities to make that experience better? And there's, you think about all sorts of things, design and layout, and when you're in that type of environment, it's how many registers can you set up and how do you queue? But one of the things that we trialed that I thought was so fun and interesting was, like, how do we edit the assortment to make the consumer journey easier? So we had this, huge footprint, the size of this space, and one of the things we wanted to test was, like, we called it the keychain test because we started there. We had something like 50 or 60 SKUs of keychains because a lot of kids, a lot of people are walking through there. They want a memento from the experience. They want to get out and go on and watch a game. And we were offering this massive assortment for this individual item. And we were like, let's test if we could cut that assortment or edit that assortment to just make it easier to navigate, what would happen? And so instead of having $1 and $2 and $5 and $7 and $10, we kind of narrowed it down to what we thought were best in class at key price points for the consumer, with a fixturing system that was really easy to navigate and placed in the right place in the store.
Oh yeah.
And we saw this massive uplift, right? And it was as simple as just starting with the consumer and saying, they're shoulder to shoulder with thousands of other people in a retail experience. How do we make this easier? I'm not sure they want to choose between 60 different keychains.
That's right.
Let's be that editor for them. And we saw this massive
is that whole in and out model, right? Like, I'm only going to give you a few SKUs, and you're going to be happier because you don't have to have this buyer's remorse. Right?
Exactly. In that environment where literally you're standing wall to wall with people.
Yeah, just give me something.
Yeah, it's like, hey, help edit this for us.
That's
like,
right.
Give us a choice, but be an initial editor for us so that we can be efficient in our experience of shopping. And so, like, my first time in retail and sort of thinking about the consumer experience and thinking about ways that we can run the business efficiently, but also make it better for the consumer. And so we got to trial things like that and really learn sort of on the ground.
Unbelievable.
What works and what doesn't, And so for me as a young person navigating a career and getting sort of initial opportunity in retail, what a better place to do that in a place that you have a deep passion. You love both brands, Nike and United.
I'm just like running the math here and I'm thinking, okay, so if you've got, let's just say 50,000 people of the 80,000 purchased that day, and they have an average ticket of $100 or $50. That's like, what is that? $2.5 million in sales in one day?
It can be. You're a little above on the traffic.
Okay.
But yes,
you're running millions of dollars through one location.
Your math on the back of the envelope is, it's a big day.
That is absolutely incredible. And that's very brilliant, just the whole customer experience. I don't know if, are you a Subway person? Do you like go to Subway, Anna?
I do. I hate to admit it. My husband makes fun of me because he thinks it's gross, but I love it. I like Jersey Mike's.
I think I do too.
Yeah.
I'm in, like, probably every 8 months, I'm like, okay, I'm in the Subway mood again. And then I go there for like a month straight.
Yeah.
But what drives me nuts is when I'm in the Subway mood, like, if you ever try to do go through the drive-through at a Subway, and amazed at how slow it is.
Oh, I don't think I could do a drive-through of that. You want to watch it and pick out
I don't think I
your-
ever have
Oh,
been through a
it's
drive-through of
unbelievable.
a
Dude, I
Subway.
go in.
Because they're customizing every single sandwich. Like, okay, now how many lines of mayo do you want on this or the other? And I'll tell you, it's like you could literally be looking across the way, and you start at the same time as somebody that's going through like an In-N-Out, and they process 10 payments before you get through your Subway one. And that's the same model though, but it's brilliant.
Yeah, and I think it's finding that right balance, because you want the consumer to have choice and find the things that they're looking for, particularly in an experience like that. I'd say 90% of these consumers are not local, right? That's a destination they've traveled to.
They're
for
excited for the store
And
as
most
much as
of
they are
them
for the game.
And
have
yeah,
an
it's a-
idea in their mind of what they're wanting, like,
That's right.
when
Exactly.
you go on a trip and you're looking
so
for a
like how
specific-
you set up a store and make it easy to navigate, to find
Yeah.
a jersey or a keychain or whatever that is for them, and make those destinations really easy to identify.
So I imagine Nike has number one position in the UK. Is that right, on the shoe side?
Well, I haven't been there in 7 years, so I'm not getting data anymore. But
Yeah.
yes, we were up there.
And who was the biggest competitor in the UK?
Adidas.
Adidas, number 2.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And then after that, you went down to Brazil?
I did, yes. So, my wife, who had never left Oregon, moved with me to Manchester for a couple of years. And then we got the call to move to Brazil. And that's a little bit more of a consideration, considering we knew we had kids coming.
Yeah.
And so that took us a little while to get our heads around. But yes, we ended up down in Sao Paulo in advance of the World Cup and Rio 16 Olympics.
That is insane. That was like the year of Brazil.
And that's one of those ones where it's like, I'm not sure if you'd asked me when I was 7 years old if I would have picked Brazil as a place I'd land when I was older. But it's a hard one to pass up, right? I mean, incredible culture, definitely a connection to football, my passion, 2 incredible events going on. Keep in mind, my background, upstate New York, Portland, Manchester, it has been 40s and rainy my entire life, right? So
That's right.
Brazil sounds pretty good when
Yeah,
you
it
start to
does.
think about it just from a pure weather
Oh,
upgrade
yeah.
perspective.
Oh,
So
that is absolutely hilarious. So I'm trying to remember who won the World Cup in 2016.
I want to say it was Germany.
Yeah, probably Germany. That is so fascinating. So
You're testing me, though.
what was it like working around the World Cup before we get to the Olympics? What was that like? Hey, sorry for this brief stop. I want to talk a little bit about our sponsor, Volcanic Retail. Volcanic Retail is a B2B platform specifically made between retail brands and retail buyers. So you can quickly organize, use our predictive analytics and computer learning, be matched up with the right retailers that have the exact same specs that you're looking for. Go register at volcanicretail.com. Let's get back in and listen to the rest of the episode.
A dream
For
come
Nike.
true. I mean,
Unbelievable.
keep in mind, like the backdrop to this is a country that's really struggling to host a major event like this.
Yeah, economically.
Some social and political challenges going on, protests. So that's sort of the backdrop. Currency devaluation, like there were some waves
Inflation
in that
problems,
water.
Yeah.
But one of the things you kind of learn about Brazilian culture is it's just deeply passionate. And so like being in a culture like that, embracing sort of a major world event, it's kind of second to none. It's an experience. Like even at Nike for 15 years, getting tons of different sports events experience, like this one was so magical because just the entire population feels it. They embrace it
And
so
so
deeply.
were you with the Nike store at that location in Brazil as well?
So at
corporate office
at that
next to
time,
it?
I was running our sportswear business, which is effectively Nike's lifestyle business.
Oh,
Everything
cool.
from the cool shoes to, as it related to the World Cup, like the medal stand jackets and the warm-up jackets
cool.
are from lifestyle. Or
So you've
from
had some pretty
sportswear.
good swag in your life.
I have a decent
Let's be
footwear-
honest.
I have a
I
decent
want to
footwear
see your
collection.
closet for a minute.
I have an okay footwear collection for sure.
You should, if you got the employee discount or whatever.
that's right.
Maybe you designed some.
Yeah.
Like, I'll take every scratch and dent that you have here. Bring it over, ship it up to me. That is.
Yeah.
Did
I was thinking much more broadly about Brazil as a marketplace and how do we, through these 2 events, kind of facilitate the brand growth, both of our performance side and then,
So-
for me particularly, the lifestyle side.
From an export perspective, Brazil and Argentina have always kind of traditionally been known as kind of protectionist countries.
For sure.
And just like the tariffs that they put on incoming brands almost makes it impossible for incoming brands to actually house themselves in Brazil. So how did Nike work around that?
It's one of the few countries where we had local for local manufacturing.
Oh, wow. Tell me
So,
more about that.
a lot of that, it wasn't 100%, but a major portion of our business.
You just manufactured it there, so you qualified
We
to
had
not pay the crazy tariffs.
We had secondary sourcing there that we manufactured locally. Yep.
Oh, that is fascinating. Unbelievable. So you did all the really cool merch when you were in Brazil, and then you had the Olympics come after the World Cup.
Back to back.
That is insane. It obviously would have been Summer Olympics. I hope they weren't having Winter Olympics down there.
It was.
Yeah, the Summer Olympics.
Yep. In a lot of ways, it felt similar in that it's just like this massive celebration of sport. And so if you enjoy sports or grew up with sports, it's just this fantastic moment that doesn't come around very often. So.
And now you're in another Olympic city, living in Park City. So you're kind of
and even in Manchester, I was focused on United and sort of the football side of the business, but the London Olympics was there too. So
holy cow, you're just like
I'm like
so
a
you're
magnet.
good vibes. Like, are you saying that
gonna
maybe
follow
the
you
Olympics
around.
will be back in Utah?
Yeah,
I'm not sure there's a correlation there, but I
well, you're here. There might be. I don't know.
I personally deeply enjoy those events, and so I love being around them. And yes, hopefully we're hosting one here in the near future too.
I would love to hear about your experience being the CEO of Jaybird and how that all came about, and your history there.
Yeah, it's an interesting one in that it feels a touch disconnected in that it's a move to technology.
Yeah.
And that was totally new space for me. What was really cool, what I gravitated to though was in the technology space, Jaybird had this deep reputation of like serving athletes first. Their whole background and history was designing headphones for runners and fitness athletes. And so in a lot of ways, the consumer felt the same or very similar to sort of my background in the last 20 years. It was again, a great opportunity to learn, jumping into a new space. And it came with a move to Utah and Park City, which is sort of hard to pass up. It's like, again, it was one of those things where it's like, I love Nike. I'd been there 15 years. My wife had as well. So we had this deep kind of connective tissue to the brand.
Yeah.
But when you kind of look at it and you're thinking about major life decisions and you're like, running a cool brand in a mountain town, with
You're clicking on all cylinders
with
at that
a
point.
deep connection to kind of the outdoors and an athletic community and lifestyle. It's like, how do you pass that one up? Like if it's the wrong decision, we can rectify it, but you got to kind of take that chance, at least for us. And so you'll find like along with sort of learning and growing and wanting to constantly be putting myself in new spaces, the other thing is like you got to take certain risks. Yeah. You gotta jump on certain challenges, and if they're poor decisions, you can always figure out how to exit. But it was an incredible experience in a lot of ways. I think it was very different from sort of my sort of career upbringing and sort of the experience I had. Nike, with every business that you run, you kind of have this wind at your back. Yeah. With a brand that most people on the planet recognize and have some affinity to, you're kind of starting with a head start. With Jaybird, it was sort of the opposite. It was more of the upstart brand in this huge marketplace where you've got Apple and Beats and Bose and Sony.
You literally have Skull Candy down the street from you.
And Skull Candy down the street. And hyper competitive landscape and without some of that groundswell or fair trade wind, if you will. And so it was really cool to kind of experience it from more of an upstart. And in this case, it was a challenging context. It was a little bit distressed. And so, for the first time in my life, I'm kind of working on sort of a turnaround, something around where we're thinking about engineering a P&L in a different way. And how do we think about sort of changing the product landscape and the marketplace to to really support this upstart brand. And
Was it primarily in like running shops at the time? When you
no,
took
it
over?
was the opposite.
Oh,
So it
is
had
it
been
more in
acquired,
mass?
and it was primarily in mass and big box.
Oh, and you had to go position it the other way.
Yes, and so we went back to sort of the top of the pyramid, refocused on DTC as a place of
Expanded
educating,
your ambassadors and your professional athletes.
Absolutely.
And now you're becoming the niche.
building
niche
specialty
brand.
again, building some of that
Smart.
higher education, higher storytelling portion of the marketplace to serve the brand in the way that we needed to. And so, very different from previous experiences where like with Nike, everybody kind of knows what they're getting into and who the brand is, and no real education required.
Wow, that's absolutely true. It's a fascinating thing because I think most brands, they romanticize the idea of starting off as a niche brand and then eventually becoming a mass brand, when the reality is the vast majority of brands really should be niche brands. That's where they're going to be best positioned for like long-term stability.
Yeah, and it's part of what fascinates me about today's marketplace. And I'm in this, and we'll talk about Summit, but as sort of an emerging or more startup niche brand, we're kind of at the end of this golden generation of DTC. You think about the emergence of like the Warby Parkers and the Bonobos, and a little bit later Allbirds and Outdoor Voices, and some of these great brands came. We've had this sort of titanic shift, this seismic shift in the marketplace, with privacy laws changing and telephone ecosystems changing and data changing. A post-COVID, era, rising costs of digital marketing, and ROAS changing, buzzwords. It's a different moment, right, for brands, and I think everybody kind of, particularly in my networking community, it's like, what's the unicorn brand? And it's like, I heard this term of like finding the ponies, which are, not the unicorns, but the brands that could be 10, 15, $20 million. You can be a really successful brand at that level, right? And finding your niche and really having a connection with your consumer and solving that need is really important, right? To the efficiency of this new world. And so, I think there's this really exciting and kind of fun, and I don't exactly know where it'll end up, but like you see a lot of the brands that started 10 years ago getting into mono-branded retail and sort of moving from the digital-centric and nativeness of their origins to having their own stores, and what happens with multi-branded environments.
Yep. And
how do brands that have been built on sort of a DTC platform migrate to that or not, I think is a really fascinating topic. It's something that I think will define sort of the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, kind of some of these, you're talking about like your e-commerce spends, and back when they, banner ads were huge and everything else. If a company that's kind of more medium size, like Jaybird, you don't have to speak specifically to Jaybird, but what do most brands like to get in a return if they're going to spend $100,000 on ads for the next few weeks? What's kind of your over and under of what you actually have to achieve in order to take that risk and spend the $100,000? Are you looking like for like a 2-to-1 return, or what are you looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I think of sort of the industry benchmark is target more chasing 3-to-1.
3-to-1.
But even when you do that math, when you think about sort of a 3-to-1, and you think about the gross margin of your specific industry, headphones a little bit different than footwear and or luxury.
That's right. You're very small margins.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you're thinking about, can I exceed that?
That's right.
But I also think, it's a little bit myopic to think about it only in terms of returns, because there's a role, at the end of the day, what I think great brands and great retailers do is think about sort of the consumer experience and how are we serving the consumer. And looking at a return on marketing is one aspect. It's the financial aspect of sort of that effort. But if you're helping them understand sort of your product positioning or your brand positioning, and you're creating sort of a broader sort of connection with that consumer, I'm not sure that the financial return is the only metric to be looking at.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
And I think sophisticated brands are thinking about lifetime value, and so like ROAS gets you into really quickly, like sort of what the return is today, or
Yeah.
over this campaign or whatever. And I think the brands that understand the ecosystem of efforts that they're making and what that has an impact on in terms of lifetime value,
Yeah.
sort of taking in sort of qualitative and quantitative metrics,
That's right.
is a more important piece of the puzzle than.
So flipping over to your new brand, Summit, how did the whole business start? And it looks like you've got some really interesting SKUs. I'd love to learn a little bit more about the company.
Yeah. Origin stories. To be honest with you, it was a little bit of luck and timing, and I think all founder stories are.
Yeah.
In one piece, it was I was working really hard on Jaybird. We were talking to a friend yesterday, and we were defining whether you're a live to work or a work to live type of person.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm a live to work type of person. Is like what I do is a part of my identity, and I love it. I really enjoy this stuff. But I was sort of deep in the throes of Jaybird and sort of rebuilding the brand and the marketplace, and but I needed a creative outlet, and so I started to think about the product that's sort of in front of you, the powder tote, more as just this fun exercise for me, just this nights and weekends kind of release, if you will, and sort of get back to the creative side and sort of exercising that other side of my brain. And I got sort of obsessed with, this sounds terrible, I love the traditional canvas tote. I love the silhouette of the tote bag. I have this nostalgic connection of that product connecting me to some of my favorite moments and my favorite people.
That's right.
Being on a boat, driving to a beach, and taking the canvas tote to the beach for a picnic.
Very
when
Northeast.
I was a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Those memories just kind of stay with you. They're foggy, but they stay with you. And so this product had this. I just had this affinity for this product, and so I really got into how can I take this forward? How can I take this product to a new place? And it was connected to, we had gotten Jaybird back to a pretty healthy place, and it was the right time for it to sort of reconnect with the mothership in terms of the bigger brand that owned us.
Yeah.
And so it was like this perfect sort of semblance of, I was working on this project in my mind, and the timing of, I was in a good place to just take a shot.
Well, it's a whole different, I think, level of satisfaction when it's a brand that you started. I mean, it's a lot more worrisome, but it's got to be extremely rewarding when you look at the products live. Like when I remember, or it's a product that you started that's actually on shelf. I mean, it's a beautiful experience.
It really is, and for every founder, and I've heard this on other podcasts and shows, it's like you underestimate the connection and the passion to.
I know.
And you underestimate how hard it is.
You do.
It's both, right? But I got a picture from a friend sitting in the Salt Lake airport, and one of my bags passed him on somebody we didn't recognize, sort of out in the wild moment.
That. Yeah.
And it's like we're starting to have that, right? Yeah. Those moments of getting this really thoughtful email from a consumer in Florida, and just sharing how the product had sort of helped his life in some way. And so, those things, you can't. I don't even know how you describe them. They're just so special as a founder. Somebody who's put in, a year's worth, or in my case, more time to get to that moment. It really helps fuel you.
Well, the bottle one is, I'd love to dig into the bottle side because it's really fascinating. There's some real innovation that comes from the bottle. You were just showing us before, and you had mentioned, which is very, very much true. We've run the sales for a lot of water bottle companies, Swell and a bunch of others, Hydrate and others. And what's really difficult in that industry is having 100% no leakage when you're kind of moving around, and that's kind of the reality, right? Like, you jump in your car, and you have cup holders, but a lot of times, that bottle ends up on the seat next to you sideways, right? Yep. That's kind of the reality of life. And what's incredible about this is kind of the technology that you have, and maybe you could show us, for those that are actually viewing it rather than just the audio, of kind of how it unwinds and also how it, and then how it sticks to the bottom and everything else.
Here, let me hold this.
Yeah, so it was a relatively simple idea, but we thought was a really cool one for this space, was taking an insulated stainless steel vessel. So you have 12 hours plus of cold or warm, which is great for a lot of us, kind of on the move, on the go. But creating sort of a leak-proof solution in sort of a way that fit the Summit brand.
Yeah.
We're a mountain town lifestyle brand.
That's right.
And so we built it with a stainless steel lid with knurled edges, kind of more thoughtful design.
It is, yeah.
And when you're not using it, if it's in your car on the side of the chair, it's leak proof. So you screw it on and it's leak proof. But when you're taking a sip out of it, we didn't want the second lid to create chaos for our consumer, right?
Which it always does.
And so we just wanted a simple solution. And so magnetically nesting in the bottom was
so
sort of
cool.
our way of solving what we felt like was a pain point for the consumer, or a subtle innovation.
It's really weird because you always kind of feel like you look at some categories and you're like, there can't be any more innovation in this category. It's tapped out.
I know, like how many water bottles do we have?
But that's the reality.
But
is
none
that's
that
new
do
innovation.
that. Yeah.
And honestly, I don't know if I have sort of a screw loose somewhere, but that's where I'm most fascinated, is taking crowded markets that generally are on a race to the bottom or at the more commodity entry level price point, and thinking about how to really innovate for the consumer, really think thoughtfully about how to make these products
We were talking a little
better.
earlier about like from igloo coolers to Yeti.
Right.
And it's just, nobody had thought, everyone I think originally thought, 15 years ago, the igloo cooler, it's good enough. How are you going to make this a little bit better? And they certainly found a way.
And the way I think about it in my mind, like, one day I was walking to a 7-Eleven getting a styrofoam cooler for $4, and then all of a sudden I needed a $350 cooler.
That's right.
And I think they did a really nice job. It's the innovation, but it's the industrial design. It's the authentic connection to the outdoors. So much of this goes beyond just the product innovation. That has to be there. That's the baseline. But the brand and how you connect with your community or your consumer, and the emotional connection that you get when you feel like you put a logo on, or you're wearing something, like there's deep value in that, and that's been proven psychologically. I grew up in playing soccer. There was this idea of like, when you dress well, you play well, kind of thing. That's true for a lot of people. That there's significant value in sort of knowing what that brand represents, knowing when I put a mark or a logo on myself.
Yeah.
It has to resonate more deeply than just I like the aesthetics of the product, or I like the innovation of the product.
Mountain Ops empowers the outdoor enthusiasts to push their limits and conquer the unknown. For 10 years, Mountain Ops has led innovation, creating top-of-the-line products from energy supplements to performance gear, transforming hundreds of thousands of lives. Through partnerships with elite athletes, Mountain Ops inspires a community to chase dreams and redefine what's possible. Beyond products, Mountain Ops gives back through Operation Conquer Hunger, donating over 6 million meals to those in need. We celebrate a conquer culture, recognized as Utah's best place to work and one of the fastest growing companies. As we mark 10 years, we reflect on challenges overcome and victories won. Here's to the next 10 years as we conquer together. Use code RWG30 for 30% off your next order.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like, I think a lot of products are born out of the issues in their life that are causing them problems, and issues that they actually would use, right, if they could fix it. Like Jen, Anna knows my wife Jen. She's kind of an interesting case study, because I think a lot of people would say, oh, she's kind of likes the poshy stuff, but she also has 7 kids, which is crazy. It's like we'll go to resorts and we'll have not only the only kids, we'll have all the kids in the whole resort. But the reality is when we're on an airplane, we have 7 different Jaybirds,
Yep.
headphones that they can all plug in. They all got their coloring books. We have to have diapers. We have to have formula. And it's not just the airplane. When we're traveling, we use that stuff all the time. But she wants to use something that's also, because she's a thoughtful-minded consumer, she also wants products that are made well and are also functional, right? It's not just the look of a product, or it's not just the function of the product, but it feels like you've done a really good job on the hybrid.
Yeah, that's our sweet spot, right? You know, Michelle and myself and our two kids, you know, we've had this incredible opportunity to kind of live around the world, which means we're on the go a lot. You know, in Brazil, we were traveling back to the U.S. 4 times a year for meetings, and we were taking personal trips to Argentina and Peru, and we were going back and forth between Sao Paulo and Rio almost weekly or every other week for these events. And so, you know, we've taken a lot of that experience of 20 plus years of sort of bouncing around, understanding what great design is, and really solving for the consumer, but not trading off aesthetic and design and beauty along with that utility. And that's really where Summit came from. I mean, we loved founding a brand that really could solve both of those problems at the same time.
I'm curious to know, so Michelle is your wife, she's your co-founder, right? What is her part in Summit? What does she focus on? Because you said you like design, right? But does she also play
She
a
does.
part
So
of
her
that?
background is in merchandising
Cool.
and product creation as well. So we had sort of a similar upbringing, if you will, at Nike.
Did she work for Nike too?
She did. Yep.
Oh,
for almost
interesting.
the exact same period of time.
Oh, no way.
And she's Portland born and raised, and sort of has this deep connection to the brand. So she works full time and then helps me in her off time. So she's sort of, you know, full time running a real estate business.
Oh, wow.
wow.
So
And then a
she's not even
mom,
full-time Summit.
And then Summit.
Wow.
So she's
Cool.
as awesome as she sounds.
Triple threat.
She's a triple threat. Yeah. You know, a lot of the designs we do are, I would say, more on the, I would say, style-informed consumer, somebody who's thinking about color and thinking about, you know, details of a stitch or, you know, elements like that. And so for that reason, like, I use powder all the time. I'm super comfortable as a person in pastels. That's a little bit of my East Coast roots. But we tend to lean a little more feminine, right? So our powder is our sort of dual gender, and we have a lot of guys using that. And then this is more feminine. But I think where she plays a great role is in 2 things. One is really a design eye with a female bent.
Yeah.
And we have this awesome group of friends that are basically our mavens. So I text 10 gals and a few guys.
Yeah, your little focus group.
Is our little insights group. And so Michelle does a lot of that and really helps with some of the insights, particularly as I'm sort of in a vacuum, sort of thinking about something. I'm working with female designers, but I want that female insight as we design, as well as male. And then I am a hyper introvert, and she's the extrovert. So she plays an amazing role of just willingness to, like, meet people and
I love
like
that.
local boutiques and starting a conversation.
Yeah.
And,
I never would have thought you were an introvert, though.
No.
You're pretty good for an introvert.
Thank
Pretty
you.
good speaker.
I work hard at it. I'm trying to hide it as best I can. It's where you get your energy. Is how I think about it more.
That's
I don't know
right.
if that's the scientific. But you know, I'm much more like, I'd love to be sketching in a room, like a creative room.
Yeah.
And that's where I fuel up, and she fuels up with, you know,
People.
15 people around
Wow.
her. And so we balance each other in that
I'm
way
not sure
really well.
what I am. I can't figure that out because, like, a lot of times I have to just be home, like, watching Animal Planet on my own, and then the other parts of my life, I like doing things like podcasts. What are you?
I don't know. I think I used to say extrovert, but now that I'm getting older, I'm definitely
you
more
can go either way, too.
introvert. But it also depends on who I'm with, you know.
Yeah.
I can get
if
that
it takes
energy from certain
if
people.
it's a difficult
Yeah.
conversation, it can suck you really fast.
Yeah.
But if it's a good conversation, it can give you a lot of energy
Yeah.
too.
This is a shameless plug for sort of a background of our brand, but it relates to
it's
this
good.
sort of
Tell us,
completely, which is we have a word to define sort of how we want to approach community, and it's called Kosalig. It's a Norwegian term, and Park City has this kind of deep tether to Scandinavia, and it felt so perfect because the word, if you were to translate it directly in English, it would mean cozy, but the word in Norwegian is so much more sort of finessed. It means like how you feel around candlelight or firelight. It means the sense you get around nature, but it also means the sense you get around people. So like if you can truly be yourself and be at ease and really be relaxed, That's Costa Lake.
Oh,
right?
interesting.
And so like I wake up every morning and I flip on Apple News and I'm like, wow, the world is partially pear-shaped, right? Like
Yeah.
I think we all get that feeling every now and again. And we want Summit to be this bastion of like when you're connecting with us in this brand,
Yeah.
we want to give you that feeling that like you can be relaxed. Like
Yeah, relax. And
we
write
handwrite
community.
notes with every order today,
Oh, that
right?
is
And
awesome.
that's the joys of being a smaller brand.
Yeah.
But we want those touch points and those feelings to make you feel like, you know what? There was a world when the Great Generation existed and people brought over pies when something went
That's
wrong.
right.
And let's
Bring some of that back.
Let's grab some of that.
I love that.
We need a little bit of that. And so, you know, I think that, you know, how we think about our products is really important, but how we think about like building this brand and this community around this brand is equally important to us in terms of trying to do something that feels important, that feels...
I'm going to go back and ask you a couple questions on ads. So when you're running Jaybird and just, I mean, all brands in general, how has it switched or morphed over the last 6-7 years with how brands spend their money? With the rise of influencers and the difficulties now you see with algorithm changes on places like Facebook and you know, what used to be really heavy digital spends, how has that changed and where do you see it going in the future?
It's a great question. I think you're right to bring up things like influence and credible authorities. You know, influencer is sort of it's a word that can imply a lot of things to a lot of people. The credible or authority kind of thing always gets connected for me because I think the brands that are finding a way to create awareness. If you think about the traditional funnel, and you know, it starts with when somebody's getting exposure to your brand, they're not going to buy right away.
No.
You know,
There's a lot of touch points.
There's a lot of touch points, and so, you know, how you interact with them in those earlier stages and touch points is really important. And so, I think there's an incredibly strong role for influence through the lens of like a credible, authentic connection, somebody who really would use your products and your brand.
Do you spend a lot of your time on like Facebook forums or groups where those are like your core demographic, like people that are, you know, somebody who's outdoorsy that, you know, obviously would use a mug like yours.
Community.
Community, and
built.
actually getting to know them as individuals. Do you spend much time doing that side of things?
I don't. I think a lot of founders do, and I think it can be really valuable.
Yeah.
So mine not doing it is not a sign that it's not a good way to spend your time. You know, I'm a strategist by kind of trade, and we're less than a year in. We're early in the Summit journey.
Yeah.
So like the answer for Summit and the answer for like a Jaybird or a Nike could be very different. Even on the last topic, like influencers, right?
Yeah.
So sports marketing was something so almost created by Nike, but this idea of professional athletes sort of representing your brand and the Jordan phenomenon is just an older version of influence or influencers. And you know, where I'm at the stage of Summit, it's like hyper authentic, hyper credible micro influence for the most part, because we're at the beginning stages of that. We want people who really know what we're talking about and what the products represent. And we're, you know, I can count on one hand how many people are touching this brand right now. And so I care more at this stage about authenticity and the core messaging being right. And I just can't get to that
instead of just
scale.
a rush for sales. It seems like you're building it, like we talked about, more for the long term. Right? And
100%.
building the credibility.
I mean, this is the lifetime value conversation, right?
This is like,
and most of our marketing today isn't even sales oriented; it's brand oriented.
This is the opposite of like the TJX brand that just wants to go in and dump product. We're going to be around for a while. We want to educate the customers. We want loyal customers. We want to have them help give us feedback on our creation of our products. It just feels really well thought out.
Yeah, well, and we some of our colors, we do a program called 980. So our assortment strategy, our merchandising strategy as an early brand, black, blue, and green are our core colors.
Oh.
And that kind of has this narrative tie to navigating a mountain. You know, you're familiar with a blue square or a black diamond or a green circle. We obviously aren't translating varsity colors. We're taking our own interpretation of that. But then we have something called 980, which is all the colors that we're telling either a seasonal story. So the Aspen white mug that you had is one of those. We're only making 980 of them, which is the vertical meters from Main Street, Park City to the tops of our peaks. It also happens to line up with your buying minimums are roughly about 1,000, right? And people ask, well, how do you scale with that strategy? And well, it's like, hey, the reason why we did that is because we want right now everything to feel special.
That's right.
We want people walking
It's the
through and being like,
experience.
I'm not going to see 1,000 of these.
That's right.
On every shelf that I walk by and with every person. And so there are ways to scale that over time. But as I think about wholesale and sort of the future of the brand, it's like, I'm not thinking about how to get into big box right away. That may be a problem I'm thinking about 15 years from now or 10 years from now or something. I'm thinking about who are the most influential 25 retailers.
That's right.
That would get an allocation of that and understand that that's valuable because they're maybe the only retailer in their city that
That's
has
right.
that access to those colors.
You're thinking about as some European countries think about it, Italy and France, and it's like it all comes down to the product and doing that the right way, and then the money will follow later on. Rather than a little bit, I mean, we're obviously a little more capitalistic over here, but a lot of times, the product capability or the dependability can vary a little bit more, which is it's pretty interesting. I got a question for you on advertising for a minute. You've had heavy Nike experience. Nike has the luxury of just throwing up the swoosh and they don't have to do any education. It's a completely clean content. It's somebody kicking a soccer ball, right? And it just has a swoosh. And quite frankly, when you have a new product, a lot of brands have to do the really heavy education portion on marketing.
Yep.
So you have to tell people why this brand is better than X, Y, or Z. So it's got to be a very difficult balance for you because you want the clean aesthetic, given your Nike background.
Yep.
But you're also a new product and you're trying to educate. So where do you land for a brand like yours?
We literally just had this conversation yesterday. So it's like perfectly timely.
Yeah.
And where I land, when I think about sort of like digital advertising is our core advertising. It's just efficient. I can do it as a team of one or two. I've got a great, couple of freelancers, but, when I think about sort of I have limited time and I have limited dollars, resources, the two most important resources, like how do we have the biggest impact? I think where we may differ from a lot of more emerging brands or brands that are in their kind of startup phase is we are working on sort of a basket of ads that we're thinking about sort of the consumer journey we want to create.
Yeah.
Now, in a digital landscape, between hitting an ad and then coming to the website and then maybe hitting an ad, an ad or whatever, and then hitting your Instagram, they're not going to hit it perfectly linearly, right?
right?
The way I map it out.
That's right.
But the way I think about it is like we are building three kind of assets right now that are more about telling our brand story. Those are our initial touch points with the consumer. We're not trying to sell.
Yeah.
I want them to come in, understand, see a product in the context of a lifestyle, see it in the context of what Summit stands for, come to the website, learn a little bit more, maybe read what we call field notes, but effectively a blog.
Yeah.
We're doing things called community casts, which is like our community is voting on specific aspects of design. So maybe interacting with the brand that way, then maybe seeing an ad that has a little bit more product specificity to it, educating on a few more of the details of how we build these products that you're going to buy once and buy really well. We've got waterproof and organization and sustainable materials and all of those things. And we're thinking about it as a longer term journey. Yeah. So like our previous conversation about ROAS, I'm less caught up in the return on my ad spend today. Yeah. I'm more interested in sort of how we build a view to lifetime value and longer term ROAS and how we think about things like building our community. So like email adoption and subscription, because we can offer all of these cool things like early access or community casts or elements that make being a part of the Summit community valuable and not be banging people over the head with, hey, buy this product now. We want to romance them with why our product is really special, and that starts with the brand.
Very interesting. Before we kind of wrap this down a little bit, interested to kind of hear your retail strategy going forward with the brand. So, I kind of look at some of the SKUs that you have right now, and I'm thinking places like high-end resorts. Like, I don't know if you've ever been to Maui, like Whalers Locker, Whalers Village. I could totally see the totes, or with the mugs, you could totally see them in golf shops.
Yep.
And certain outdoor stores, not the hook and bullet outdoor stores.
Yep.
But more of like the REI versions of the world, the Teva Sandal type of stuff. Tell me, where do you see the brand going on the retail side?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we're going to start our wholesale journey here pretty soon, and I'm going to do it very methodically. So when I talk about me starting it, it means you'll probably see it in retail in like 12 months or 9 months.
Yeah.
But I do see us starting with boutiques and specialty, and I would include in that resort retail.
Yep.
I also, having come through the Nike and Jaybird journey, some of my favorite lifestyle boutiques I could see carrying our broader assortment. And so, I think of like Stag Provisions or St. Bernard in Texas, if you guys are familiar with the Texas market, or Hatchet Supply Co. in Brooklyn, or just
That's right.
people who are exuding an outdoor forward lifestyle, but it's the lifestyle side of it. It's the versatile pieces. It's not like your ski equipment, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And those types of boutiques are influencers. So like I think of influence broader than just people on TikTok or Instagram. I think of it much more broadly than that. And so retailers that can storytell and have an editorial side to their business, and sort of what I call a maven side, people who are experts. Like I would go to them and ask about style or taste. I think going to be the first port of call. As we grow, green grass for sure. Our Tumblr is set up really well for that. All of our products we can customize, so we also have the capabilities to service that channel. But I also look at like players like Huckberry or Tuckernuck, if you're familiar with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The balance of great storytelling with great product. Those types of retailers sort of come to the top of my mind of like, in a perfect world, seem like great partners for Summit in the future.
Wow. Well, it's been super fascinating dialogue. It's an incredible background that you have. You're even sporting the Nikes right now, which is super rad. But, I certainly appreciate just real quick question for you. Favorite soccer or football team, as you would call it, of all time? Who's the best ever?
So I'm very partial to English football or the Premier League. The Invincibles of Arsenal.
Yep.
Probably take that one for me was sort of a special time, and it was sort of a weird time to be an American kid. Yeah. Loving that because there's no televised games.
That's right.
Everything you were learning from buying like videos in soccer shops.
That's exactly right.
So like I grew up watching like George Best. He wasn't playing when I was growing up, but the Invincibles at Arsenal were just this incredible story.
Favorite player of all time?
Ronaldinho.
No, really?
Yeah, he may not be the best player of all time, but my favorite player, Ronaldinho, because he brought sort of this hyper talent with this expression. Like he would dance after goals, and he just had this like love of life that sort of manifested on the field that I have not seen since. And so I have this sort of deep connection with sort of his style of play.
Well, it's been super cool having you. I'm excited to watch the journey of Summit.
I know. I'm excited to see the products out in the wild. I'll send you a picture.
Yeah, please do.
Please do. Yeah. Tag that sucker on Instagram.
It makes my day, like literally.
Well, thanks so much, Jamie.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Take care.